When I first laid eyes on that little baby, nestled in my sister-in-law's arms, something deep inside me twisted like a knot in an old rope. It was a quiet evening in her small apartment, the kind where the air smelled faintly of baby powder and warmed milk. And the soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound breaking the silence. I had come over to drop off some groceries, diapers, formula, few onesies I'd picked up on sale because that's what family does, right? Help each other out. But as I leaned in to coo at the child, his tiny face turned toward me, and those eyes. Oh, those eyes were the spitting image of my husband's. The same deep brown, flecked with gold, framed by lashes that curled just so. I felt a chill snake down my spine, even though the room was warm from the heater buzzing in the corner. I told myself it was nothing, just a family resemblance. After all, siblings share genes. But as I drove home that night, the streetlights blurring through the windshield, that knot wouldn't loosen. It pulled tighter, whispering doubts I wasn't ready to hear. My name is Evelyn. I've always been the steady one, the woman who keeps the home fires burning while life swirls around her. I met my husband, Thomas, back in our college days, at a campus coffee shop where the aroma of fresh grounds mingled with the chatter of students buried in textbooks. He was studying engineering, all sharp angles and quiet confidence, with a smile that could light up the dimmest room. I was pursuing nursing, drawn to the healing side of things, to mending what was broken. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of a simple life, a house with a garden. Kids running through the yard, the kind of stability neither of us had growing up. Thomas came from a fractured family. His parents divorced when he was young, and his sister Lila was the one constant in his life. She was 5 years younger, a free spirit who bounced from job to job, always chasing some new adventure. I admired her independence at first, but over the years, it became clear she leaned on Thomas more than she should. We married in a small ceremony under an oak tree in the park, the leaves rustling like applause as we exchanged vows. For better or worse, we promised, and for the first 12 years, it was mostly better. We bought a modest 2-story home in the suburbs, the kind with creaky wooden floors and a kitchen that always smelled of whatever I was baking, apple pies in the fall. Fresh bread on weekends. Thomas worked long hours at his firm, designing bridges and buildings that connected people, while I picked up shifts at the local hospital, tending to patients with a gentle touch and a listening ear. We didn't have children of our own, not for lack of trying. After a few heartbreaking miscarriages, we decided to focus on each other, on building a life that felt full without the pitter-patter of little feet. It wasn't perfect. Money was tight sometimes, and Thomas's job meant occasional travel, but we had our routines. Morning started with coffee at the kitchen table, his hand brushing mine as he passed the cream. Evenings were for unwinding on the porch swing, watching the sun dip below the horizon, sharing stories from our days. Lila lived about 30 minutes away, in a cramped apartment complex where the walls were thin and the neighbors' arguments seeped through like smoke. She had always been a bit of a wanderer, dating men who promised the world but delivered heartache. Thomas worried about her constantly, calling to check in, sending money when her rent was due. "She's family, Evie," he'd say, his voice soft but firm, those brown eyes pleading. "If we don't help her, who will?" I understood. My own brother had passed young, leaving a void that family bonds were meant to fill. So when Lila announced she was pregnant 2 years ago, alone and scared, Thomas stepped up without hesitation. He helped her with doctor appointments, painted the nursery in soft blues, even set up a college fund for the baby. "It's what a good uncle does," he told me one night as we lay in bed, the ceiling fan worry above us. I squeezed his hand, proud of the man I'd married. At first, it was just weekends. Thomas would drive over to Lila's, mow her tiny patch of lawn, fix a leaky faucet, babysit so she could catch a shift at the diner. I'd tag along sometimes, bringing casseroles. I'd whipped up chicken and rice. Hearty and comforting, the steam rising like a hug. Lila was grateful, her hugs lingering a bit too long, but I chalked it up to her emotional state. Pregnancy, hormones, I thought. The baby, little Noah, arrived on a stormy night, his cries piercing the hospital room as Lila held him close. Thomas was there, of course, pacing the waiting area with me, his face etched with worry. When we finally saw Noah swaddled in a blanket, I felt a pang of what could have been for us. But Thomas's eyes lit up like I'd never seen, and he whispered, "He's perfect." I smiled, ignoring the faint unease that fluttered in my chest. As the months passed, Thomas's visits became more frequent. Weeknights, too. "Lila's exhausted," he'd explain, slipping out the door with a quick kiss on my cheek. The scent of his cologne woody and familiar trailing behind him. I'd nod, busying myself with laundry or a book, the house feeling a tad emptier in his absence. Money started disappearing from our joint account, small amounts at first, then larger sums for baby needs. I questioned it once over dinner. The clink of forks against plates, the only sound as I waited for his response. Formulas, expensive, Evie, and daycare. It's a fortune. His tone was reasonable, but his eyes darted away, focusing on the salt shaker instead. I let it go, not wanting to seem unsupportive. After all, family came first. But deep down, that knot from the first time I saw Noah began to tighten again, pulling at threads I didn't know were frayed. One evening, as autumn leaves crunched underfoot outside our window, Thomas came home later than usual. The clock ticked steadily in the living room, each second amplifying the quiet. He smelled different, not just his cologne, but a hint of something sweeter, like baby shampoo. "Rough day?" I asked, stirring the soup on the stove, the bubbles popping softly. He murmured something about traffic, but his hug felt distant, his arms loose around me. That night, as he slept beside me, his breathing even and deep, I lay awake staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Little things started adding up. A receipt for a jewelry store tucked in his pocket earrings. He said, "For Leela's birthday." A text message that lit up his phone screen while he showered. "Miss you already. Come back soon." From Leela, I told myself it was innocent, sisterly affection. But doubt is a quiet thief, stealing peace bit by bit. The doubt grew like a weed in my heart, creeping into moments that used to feel safe. I'd be folding towels, the fresh laundry scent wrapping around me, when the image of Noah's eyes, those golden flecked brown eyes, would flash in my mind. I'd shake it off, tell myself I was being foolish. Thomas was a good man, wasn't he? The kind who'd stay up late fixing a neighbor's porch step or drive an hour to help his sister. But the questions kept coming, soft and persistent, like the drip of a faucet you can't quite fix. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The way he'd angled his phone away when he texted. The extra long showers after visiting Leela, the way his laugh sounded tighter, like it was holding something back. It was a Tuesday in early November, the air crisp with the promise of winter, when the first real clue hit me like a slap. I was cleaning out the Karawar old sedan, cluttered with coffee cups and grocery lists, when I found it. A folded piece of paper tucked under the passenger seat. My fingers brushed against it, crinkled and soft like it had been handled too many times. I unfolded it, expecting a receipt or a parking ticket, but it was a handwritten note in Leela's loopy scrawl. "T, you left your jacket here. Noah loves when you sing to him. Hurry back." The words were innocent enough, but the little heart drawn next to her name made my stomach lurch. I sat there in the driveway, the cold leather seat creaking under me, staring at that heart like it was a confession. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Siblings could be affectionate, couldn't they? But the knot in my chest tightened, and I shoved the note into my pocket, my hands trembling. That evening, I watched Thomas closer than usual. He came home at 6, his work boots thudding against the mat as he kicked them off. "Smells good in here," he said, nodding toward the pot of chili simmering on the stove. It's the tang of tomatoes and cumin filling the kitchen. I smiled, but it felt like a mask. "How's Lila?" I asked, stirring the pot, the wooden spoon scraping softly against the metal. His shoulders stiffened just for a second before he shrugged. "She's managing. Noah's teething, so she's up a lot." His voice was smooth, but his eyes didn't meet mine. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, the glass clinking as he popped the cap, and changed the subject to a bridge project at work. I nodded along, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that note, the heart, the way he'd been helping more than ever. I tried to push it down to be the supportive wife I'd always been, I reminded myself of our vows, of the way Thomas had held my hand through every miscarriage, his thumb rubbing circles on my skin as I cried. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine, and I wasn't about to let suspicion tear us apart. So I went with him to Lila's the next weekend. A plastic container of homemade cornbread in my lap, the car humming along the familiar route. Her apartment was the same as always, cluttered with baby toys, the faint smell of lavender lotion lingering in the air. Noah was in his high chair, smearing mashed peas on his tray, giggling as Thomas made silly faces at him. Leela was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of tea, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Evie, you're a saint for this cornbread," she called, her voice bright. But when she looked at Thomas, there was something in her eyes, a softness, a secret that made my skin prickle. I kept my smile in place, but I started watching them like a hawk. The way Thomas's hand lingered on Lila's shoulder when he passed her a dish. The way she laughed too quickly at his jokes, her head tilting just so. I told myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion and my own insecurities were playing tricks on me. But then Noah reached for Thomas, his chubby arms outstretched, and called him Dud. The room went quiet. The only sound, the faint clatter of Lila's spoon against the teapot. My heart stopped. Thomas laughed it off, ruffling Noah's hair. "Kids say the darndest things, don't they?" he said, but his voice cracked just enough to notice. Lila busied herself at the sink, her back to me, and I felt like I was drowning in that tiny, overheated apartment. On the drive home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The words spilled out before I could stop them. "Why did Noah call you Dada, Thomas?" My voice was steady, but my hands gripped the seatbelt like it was a lifeline. He glanced at me, then back at the road, his jaw tight. "He's a baby, Evie. He hears Lila say daddy when she talks about his father. It's just babble." His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he was trying too hard. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to go back to the days when his word was enough, when I didn't question the man who'd promised to love me forever. But that note, that heart, those eyes, they were all I could see. The suspicion gnawed at me for weeks, turning every quiet moment into a battleground of doubt. I started checking things I'd never thought to check before: his phone bill, the bank statements, even the GPS history in the car. Each time I felt like I was betraying him, betraying us. But the truth was a splinter under my skin, and I couldn't ignore it. I found more receipts, dinners for two at places he'd never taken me, a baby store purchase for a crib we hadn't discussed. I told myself there were explanations, that I was building a mountain out of nothing. But deep down, I knew I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't unsee. It was a cold December night when the truth came crashing down. Thomas was at Lila's again, helping with Noah's bedtime. I'd stayed home claiming a headache, but really I needed space to think. I was tidying up, trying to keep my hands busy, and I found a stack of papers in his briefcase, bills, mostly, but one caught my eye. It was Noah's birth certificate tucked between utility notices like it was nothing. My hands shook as I pulled it out, the paper crinkling under my fingers. There, in black and white, was Thomas's name, listed as the father. The room spun, the ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly deafening. I sank to the floor, the certificate clutched in my hand, and felt the world I'd built shatter around me. The certificate burned in my hand like a brand, the ink blurring through the tears that welled up unbidden. How could this be? Thomas, my Thomas, the man who'd kissed me good morning every day for over a decade, listed as the father of his sister's child. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. Extra visits, the money, the lingering touches I dismissed as familial. It wasn't help. It was a cover. An affair right under my nose with his own sister. No, wait, that couldn't be. Lila wasn't his blood sister. Thomas had told me early on that she was adopted, a fact I'd forgotten in the warmth of our blended family. But still, the betrayal sliced through me like a knife, cold and sharp. I sat there on the living room floor, the carpet fibers pressing into my knees, and let the sobs come, quiet at first, then building until my chest ached. I don't know how long I stayed like that. The house dark except for the glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. Eventually, I heard the front door creak open, Thomas's keys jingling as he dropped them on the hall table. "Evie, you still up?" His voice was light, unsuspecting, and it fueled a fire in me I didn't know I had. I wiped my face, clutching the certificate, and stood to face him as he entered the room. He froze when he saw me, his eyes flicking to the paper in my hand. "What's that?" he asked, but his tone had shifted, guarded now, like he already knew. I held it up, my hand steady despite the storm inside. "This is Noah's birth certificate, Thomas. Your name is on it, as the father." The words hung in the air, heavy and accusing. He opened his mouth, closed it, then sank into the armchair, his shoulders slumping. "Evie, I can explain." But there was no explanation that could mend this. He told me everything then, the story spilling out in halting whispers. It started a few years back during one of Lila's rough patches. She'd been dumped by another boyfriend, drowning in debt, and Thomas had gone over to console her. One glass of wine led to another, and in a moment of weakness, they crossed a line they shouldn't have. It was a mistake, he said, but when Lila found out she was pregnant, they decided to keep it quiet. "For the family," he murmured, his eyes pleading. "I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me." The word echoed in my mind as I stared at him, this stranger in my husband's skin. "You lied to me for 2 years," I said, my voice breaking. "You let me hold that baby, love him like a nephew, while you ... I couldn't finish. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the touch that once comforted now repelling me. "It was just once, Evie, I swear. I've been trying to make it right, supporting them so you wouldn't have to. Make it right. By draining our savings, by building a secret life." The confrontation stretched into the night, our words sharp and raw. He begged for forgiveness, tears streaking his face. But all I could see was the deception. The way he'd looked at Noah with a father's pride while denying me that joy. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the bedroom, the floorboards creaking under my bare feet, while Thomas slept on the couch downstairs. My mind raced, piecing together every odd moment, every excuse. By morning, the shock had hardened into resolve. I couldn't stay in this house of lies. I packed a bag quietly, the zipper's rasp sounding like a finality, and left a note on the kitchen table. "I need time. Don't call." The drive to my cousin's house was a blur. The radio's soft hum the only company as tears streamed down my face. She welcomed me with open arms. No questions at first. Just a warm mug of tea and a listening ear when I was ready. The days that followed were a fog of pain and planning. I called in sick to work, my voice hollow over the phone, and spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying our life together. How had I missed the signs? Was I too trusting, too naive? But amid the hurt, a spark of anger ignited anger at Thomas for his betrayal, at Lila for her complicity, at myself for ignoring the whispers. I hired a lawyer quietly, a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes who laid out my options over coffee in her office, the steam curling like question marks. Divorce, division of assets, the cold mechanics of unraveling a marriage. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life. Confronting Leela was harder. I drove to her apartment a week later, the winter wind whipping leaves across the parking lot. She answered the door with Noah on her hip, his little face lighting up before she saw my expression. "Evie, what?" I cut her off, stepping inside, the door clicking shut behind me. "I know, Lila, about Thomas." "About Noah?" Her face crumpled and she set the baby down in his playpen, his coos filling the tense silence. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, twisting her hands. "It was a mistake. We didn't mean for it to happen." But mistakes have consequences, and hers had shattered my world. We talked or argued for hours, her tears mixing with mine. She admitted the affair was brief, but the secret had bound them. "He loves you, Evie, not me." Her words were meant to soothe, but they only deepened the wound. I left without forgiving her, the doors slam echoing in my ears as I rebuilt. Piece by piece, I leaned on friends I'd neglected in my married bliss. Lunches with old nursing colleagues, walks in the park where the crisp air cleared my head. I started therapy too, sitting in a cozy office with tissues at the ready, unpacking the layers of grief. "You have strength you don't know yet," my therapist said, her voice gentle. And slowly I began to see it. I found a small apartment, furnished it with thrift store finds a comfy chair by the window. Plants that thrived under my care. Work became my anchor. The patient stories reminding me that healing was possible, even from the deepest cuts. "Your Honor," he said, glancing briefly at Sienna, "I only want what's best for my daughter. Grace needs help. I've tried to be patient, but she's unpredictable." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Every word was like watching our life rewritten line by someone who'd never loved me. Then it was Sienna's turn. Her voice was soft, trembling at just the right moments. She told the court she'd been the one to help Daniel through his grief. That I'd refused counseling, that I'd kept the baby's existence secret out of spite. "We were devastated," she said, her voice catching. "We thought she'd lost the baby. And then to find out she hadn't." It broke Daniel's heart all over again. Tears welled in her eyes, perfectly timed. I almost admired the performance. Almost when it was my turn, I stood and tried to steady my breathing. The courtroom blurred for a second, faces blending into one sea of quiet judgment. "I didn't fake my miscarriage," I began, my voice shaking. "I hid my pregnancy because I was scared. I found out about the affair when I was 6 months along, and I didn't know what to do. I thought I'd protect my child from the chaos, from the lies." The judge leaned forward. "Why pretend to miscarry, Mrs. Parker? I didn't think anyone would believe me," I said softly. Everyone loved Daniel and Sienna. She was already in our lives, acting like she belonged there. I needed time to plan, to get away safely. The opposing lawyer pounced. "So you admit you lied?" Swallowed hard. "I made a mistake. But not to hurt anyone, to protect my daughter." He smiled, satisfied. "To protect her from what, exactly?" "A loving father. A stable home." That word stable cut deeper than any insult. I wanted to scream that their home was built on deceit, that Daniel had broken me long before I'd ever lied. But I stayed quiet because that's what mothers do when every word can be twisted into proof of their instability. When the session ended, the judge didn't give a ruling immediately. She said she'd review all materials and consider the best interest of the child. As we left the courtroom, Sienna gave me a small, triumphant smile, the kind that said she already knew how this story ended. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. Reporters stood near the steps, cameras ready, like vultures circling the aftermath. One called out, "Grace, did you fake your miscarriage? Is it true your ex is seeking full custody?" I froze, unable to move, until Martin gently guided me past them. "Don't answer. They'll twist anything you say." But it was too late. The damage was already done. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere again. "Grace Parker faces custody battle over child she hid for months." New testimony suggests mental health issues behind fake miscarriage. Scandal. The truth had become background noise. That night, I sat in my living room, the silence so deep it hurt. Lily slept peacefully in her crib, unaware of the world that wanted to tear us apart. I watched her tiny chest rise and fall. I felt a calm fury settle inside me. If I couldn't win in the court of opinion, I'd win in the court of truth. There was one person who could prove my story: Nurse Eleanor White, the woman who had helped me deliver Lily in that small private clinic. She'd promised confidentiality, but maybe, just maybe, she'd still remember me. I spent hours searching for her contact information. Finally, after scrolling through an old clinic Facebook page, I found a post with her name. Retired now. Living 3 towns away, the next morning I packed Lily into the car and drove. 3 hours of winding roads and nervous silence before I found her small cottage by the sea. When she opened the door, she looked surprised but kind. "Grace," she asked softly, "I wondered when I might hear from you." I broke down right there on her porch. "They're saying I lied. They're taking her away from me. Please tell them the truth." She led me inside, poured me tea, and listened quietly. Then she nodded slowly. I remember that night. You came in alone. You said you needed privacy for safety reasons. I signed your delivery record myself. She went to a drawer, pulled out a worn folder, and handed it to me. Inside was my signed medical file, proof that Lily had been born under my name, that no miscarriage had ever been recorded. It wasn't just paper. It was my salvation. When I returned home, I scanned everything and sent it to Martin. He called within minutes. Grace, this changes everything. We can file a motion to reopen testimony, but we'll need to move fast. For the first time in months, I felt hope flicker again. Real, trembling hope. But then that night, someone broke into my house, not to steal, not to vandalize, just to take the folder. The lock on my back door was broken. The drawer where I'd left it empty. The only thing left behind was a note taped to the fridge. You should have stayed quiet. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the note trembling in my hand. The refrigerator hummed softly. It's the only sound in a house that suddenly felt foreign, invaded. You should have stayed quiet. 6 words that made my skin crawl. The police came, took photos, dusted for prints. One of them, a younger officer with kind eyes, asked gently, "Do you have any enemies, ma'am?" I almost laughed. "Just one who sleeps beside my ex-husband." But I didn't say that. I simply nodded and told him I suspected who it might be. They promised to investigate. But I knew how these things worked. They'd file a report, maybe follow up, and then forget. I couldn't afford to wait for justice that moved at the pace of paperwork. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and began typing a letter to the judge. If I couldn't protect the truth with evidence, I'd protect it with my voice. Your Honor, my name is Grace Parker. I am not a perfect woman, but I am an honest mother. The man seeking custody of my child is the same man who broke into my home and stole the one document that could clear my name. If you won't believe me, then please listen to my child's heartbeat in that file. It's proof she's real, and so is my love for her. I printed it, sealed it, and mailed it first thing in the morning. But I knew a letter alone wouldn't be enough. Rumors had painted me as unstable, and the only way to erase that image was to stand in front of it. Unflinching, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I went public. I started small, a quiet Facebook post on a local parenting group. Just my photo, a short caption, and the truth. They said I faked a miscarriage. I didn't. I hid my child to keep her safe. Sometimes a mother's silence is her only shield until the world forces her to speak. I went to bed expecting silence. By morning, there were hundreds of comments. Then thousands. Women shared their own stories of abuse, of gaslighting, of being called crazy when they were only afraid. Some didn't believe me, but most did. The tide began to turn. A local journalist reached out asking to meet. Her name was Mara, and she said something that stuck with me. People will forget rumors, Grace, but they'll remember a mother who fought back. We met at a cafe. She recorded everything. My story, my evidence, the police report, even the missing folder. When her article went live 2 days later, it exploded. Woman accused of faking miscarriage says ex stole evidence. Police investigating. The same outlets that once mocked me now wanted interviews. But I turned them all down except for one radio show, where I spoke directly to whoever had written that note. You told me to stay quiet, I said, my voice steady. But I won't. You can take my documents, you can twist my story, but you will never take my child's truth. Not anymore. That broadcast reached more people than I could have imagined. Within days, Nurse Eleanor's clinic contacted my lawyer. They had kept digital backups of every birth record. The file had been tampered with after I left, but the timestamp showed something critical. Sienna's name had been accessed using Daniel's credentials. It was the proof we needed, not just that Lily was mine, but that they'd tried to erase her. When Martin called with the news, I broke down. All the strength I'd been holding on to shattered at once. It wasn't just relief. It was mourning for everything I'd lost along the way. Trust, peace, the woman I used to be. The court date for the final hearing arrived like a reckoning. This time I didn't wear navy. I wore white. When Daniel saw me, his face tightened. Maybe out of guilt, maybe pride. I didn't care which. Sienna wasn't beside him. Rumor was she'd been questioned by police about the break-in. The judge looked stern when we began. Martin presented the digital records first, then the police report, and finally a printed transcript of my broadcast. When the judge turned to Daniel, her voice was icy. "Mr. Parker, would you like to explain why your credentials were used to access and alter medical records from your wife's delivery?" Daniel stammered, tried to deny it, but the evidence was irrefutable. Every lie he'd built began to crumble in that courtroom. For the first time, I didn't feel like the accused. I felt like a mother standing on the edge of justice, not begging for it, but demanding it. The ruling came 2 weeks later. I sat alone in my living room when Martin called. "Grace," he said quietly, "the judge granted you full custody. And she's ordered a formal investigation into Daniel and Sienna for evidence tampering." I couldn't speak. Tears came silently, slipping down my cheeks as Lily babbled on the carpet beside me, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. I picked her up and held her close, whispering, "It's over, baby. We're safe now." Thomas and I crossed paths occasionally, unavoidable in our small world. Once at the grocery store, the fluorescent aisles lined with colorful boxes. He appeared at the end of the produce section, basket in hand. Our eyes met, and he nodded, a tentative smile. "You look well, Evie." I returned a nod, my voice even. "I am. No lingering, no drama, just to people who'd shared a chapter now closed." He was paying child support for Noah, court-ordered. And from what I heard through the grapevine, he'd stepped up as a father, visiting regularly without the secrecy. Lila had found stability in her new town, waitressing at a family diner. Her updates sparse, but polite when mutual friends mentioned her. Noah was thriving, or so the photos showed, chubby cheeks and that familiar smile. I sent a birthday card once, a simple one with balloons, signing it Aunt Evie. It felt right, separating the innocence from the hurt. Forgiveness came slowly. Not in a grand gesture, but in quiet releases. One rainy afternoon, curled up with a book in my armchair, a patter on the window, a soothing rhythm, I realized I no longer harbored rage. It had faded to understanding Thomas's weakness, born from his own fractured past, Lila's from desperation. They weren't villains, just flawed humans who'd made choices that rippled outward. I wrote letters I never sent, pouring out the pain on paper, then burning them in the sink. The flames curling the edges until only ash remained. Therapy continued. My sessions a safe space to unpack lingering doubts. "What do you want now?" my therapist asked, notepad in lap. I thought of the garden on my balcony, blooming despite the odds. "Peace," I said, "and maybe, someday, love again." Socially, I've blossomed in ways I hadn't expected. I joined a book club at the library, the room filled with the scent of old pages and fresh coffee. Discussions turned personal, bonds forming over shared vulnerabilities. One member, a widower named Mark, shared laughs with me over plot twists, his eyes crinkling in a way that warmed me. We started with coffee after meetings, then walks in the park, leaves crunching underfoot. It wasn't rushed, just gentle exploration, his hand brushing mine, sending sparks I thought I'd lost. "No pressure," he said one evening, as sunset painted the sky in oranges. I smiled, feeling alive. Work promotions came, to a lead nurse position with more responsibility but also fulfillment. Mentoring younger staff, guiding them through tough cases, reminded me of my purpose. Patients' thank yous, scrawled on cards or whispered in recovery rooms, built my confidence. "You're a lifesaver," one said, squeezing my hand. I carried that with me, a reminder that I could mend others while mending myself. As seasons changed, so did I. Spring brought new growth, summer warmth, fall reflection, winter rest. I hosted a small gathering for friends, the apartment alive with chatter and the aroma of roasted vegetables. Laughter filled the space, a sound I'd missed. In those moments, I saw my strength not in enduring pain, but in choosing joy after it. And so here I am today, sipping tea on my balcony as the sun sets, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold that remind me of fresh starts. The pain of that discovery, the weight of betrayal, it shaped me, but it didn't break me. Instead, it taught me the quiet power of self-respect, of knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Thomas and Lila are part of my past now, a chapter closed with lessons etched deep. Noah, that sweet boy with his father's eyes, will grow up knowing family isn't always blood, it's the love we choose to give. I've found my peace in the simple things. A canvas waiting for color. A friend's voice on the line, the steady beat of my own heart, unburdened. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? From the ashes of what was, something stronger blooms. I share this not for pity, but for those out there carrying similar knots in their chests, wondering if the unraveling will ever end. It does, my dears. With time, with grace, with the courage to choose yourself. Would you have found the strength to walk away or tried to mend what was shattered? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched you, consider subscribing for more heartfelt tales from the voices of Auntie May. Your support means the world. Until next time, take care of your hearts.